Oh boy, do I have a treat for you today. An in-depth Darius guide, the deck, how to play it, different game plans, tricks and tips for the deck in general, and baited hook, how to plan ahead, and finally, different lines to end the game with. This video has a bunch of information, so it's not only for Darius players, but for everyone. You will learn something new, especially if you're gonna keep using hook later on during the new sets. And to make things easier for you, I'm gonna put timestamps for everything in the description. Let's start with the deck in general. This version of the deck right now is probably the hardest to play out of all the previous versions of my Darius hook, but it is also the most reliable and rewarding if you get your practice in with the deck and master it. So I'm gonna go over the biggest key cards of the deck. Firstly, 3 Darius champions. They are honestly my favorite part of this deck outside of baited hook. Darius champion is such a strong and valuable card that playing multiple of them in game is almost a win con in itself. So if you get multiple Dariuses in your hand champion zone, they can give you so much value that you just win the game by playing down Dariuses, which is kind of crazy. But red Darius is also one of the hardest units to play in the entirety of Riftbound. It always needs the second card. It is pretty expensive in itself, but then you always have to play something else to also activate your Darius, which also costs a little more. But because Darius is a 5 might unit, it also makes playing baited hook itself a little bit harder, but I will get there later. Some have commented that, oh, my Darius just gets killed off next turn if I attack with my Darius, and etc, etc. But let's say you accelerate a 7 might Darius, it kills a unit, it conquers a battlefield alone, so it gets you a point alone. Next turn, your enemy plays a spell on the Darius, and then attacks your Darius with a unit, so the enemy also has to commit a unit to conquer that battlefield back from you. Your Darius did die, but it got its value. Think about it. It killed a unit, conquered a battlefield, got you a point, your opponent played a spell on it, and your opponent committed a unit to conquer that battlefield back, and next turn you can just kill off the enemy's unit again. Then the dream scenario is that your Darius survives, which is even better, but even if you got the 1 kill and 1 conquer out of him, it's still insane value. Then Vayne. Honestly, I like Vayne. I'm thinking of main decking 2 Vaynes. I think it's a little bit stronger than Kai'Sa, in my personal opinion, but Vayne is also a card with some skill ceiling to get max value out of her. You can also play her like in the early game if you really have to, because an accelerated 5 might unit may catch your enemy off guard, but then when your Vayne is not attacking, she's very weak. Now pair Vayne with Kai'Sa and the Dariuses, and suddenly you have around 6-7 accelerate units in your deck, and couple accelerated units can just blow out the game before your enemy can even do anything. Grand Stratagem is a weird card. I have it in my deck as more of a threat for the enemy. This way, even if it isn't the best card to have, it just forces your enemy to play around it in certain situations. It's also just bad in this specific meta because of all the aggressive Kai'Sa decks and all the spell heavy decks. And drawing Stratagem early on does hurt a ton because it will be a brick for most of the game. But other than Kai'Sa and maybe Teemo and even Victor, Stratagem is a very good card into anything unit heavy, Volibear, anything green. Stratagem cannot be defied, and it counters Yi and Ahri very well. It's good into set, and it's just insane against Aurora, but like I said, it's not that amazing into Teemo, Victor, Kai'Sa, etc. The worst part of Stratagem is the threat of drawing it early, and it will be unplayable for the next 5 turns. So be careful how many Stratagems you have in your main deck, and the reason why you don't need Stratagem to end the game is not only because of all the Dariuses, all the accelerate units, it's also because of Draven. I'm sorry, but it is the rule.
Not Draven, Draven.
But let's say you get 2 drops, 3 drops, you get to 3 points early on, you play Darius, accelerated, it pushes you to 5 points very early on. Suddenly your Draven just might be a 8 to 9 might unit at turn 4, and that alone can just be too big for the enemy to handle. At that point, the Draven just even solos a Watcher, and getting 1 or even 2 Dravens in the late game is usually over for the enemy, and you can find Draven very easily from the hook. hook because it is a 3 might unit only. So Draven is kind of a more reliable game ender than like Grand Stratagem is, because you can play it in multiple situations, you can play it early on if you really need to, and you can get it from hook very cheaply because it's only a 3 might unit. And then the Vanguard Captain, Spectral Matron, they're very good together. Pair them with a seal and you go wide instantly. Sometimes you can kill your Vanguard Captain on purpose. So when you play your Spectral Matron, you have the Vanguard Captain in your trash, and then you can take it back with the Spectral Matron, and suddenly one Spectral Matron then equals to 9 might and 4 different units, which is kind of crazy sometimes. And these two cards lead us to the grand jewel of this deck, the baited hook, of course. So baited hook, you may kill your own unit with your hook to take another unit that is up to 1 might bigger than the killed unit from the top 5 cards of your deck. First of all, hook costs 1 yellow power and 1 energy, so it does require either a seal or just good resource managing. And secondly, hook does have a lot of niche tips and tricks. You can, for example, kill your Vanguard Captain for 1 rune and 1 power, find a matron, and your 3 might Vanguard Captain that you just killed with your baited hook became a 9 might 4 units board. So hook can be very explosive and very oppressive sometimes. It is basically an infinite value engine, and with hook on board, you aren't relying on card draw that much, which is a big plus for this deck with a very limited card draw in general. But I'm gonna go over everything baited hook later on, because there is a lot to talk about just when talking about baited hook alone. And lastly, there are spells of this deck. Falling Stars, they are insane against green decks. Cleaves can just make your tokens 4 might and accelerate Darius for very cheap. And Cleave can also make your Darius a 10 might unit, which is very crazy. Salvage is just a gear counter. And Grand Stratagem is for those slower matchups where you can actually get your board big enough. Then there are 3 hidden blades in the deck. You can either kill your own unit to draw 2 or kill an enemy unit for some tempo and maybe more points potentially for you. So Hidden Blade is a very, very versatile card, especially because it can also be hidden, like the name Hidden Blade insists. So if you have a yellow seal on board, Hidden Blade is just insane value. It's very versatile and you can just hide it for basically 0. And on top of all this, Hidden Blade also counters any OTKs, any big unit game plans like Anidex with their Vi Ride the Wind or Master Yees with their Dead Blooms. And Hidden Blade also counters accelerated Watchers very, very well. But remember, Hidden Blade can be defied. And the biggest drawback of spells are that you have to be very, very careful of how many spells you put into your deck, because drawing too many spells early on will also slow you down and break your hand. So you have to find that sweet spot where you have good spells, you have enough spells, but you don't have too many spells. So that was a small introduction to most of the cards in the deck. I am trying to move as quickly as possible. I still don't know how long this video will end up being. So let's just move to the game plan part of the video. And contrary to popular belief, Darius Hook has a ton of possibilities and game plans. It's not just a hook deck. Sometimes you can be very aggressive, very straightforward, and sometimes you can go more mid-range, take those value trades with spells and units, and sometimes you can even become a control deck with like couple Falling Stars, Hidden Blades, and Darius Champion is also like a control champion technically. And before I move any further, I'm gonna quickly mention the idea behind the 3 battlefields of the deck. Trifarian War Camp, you pick it in the first game. It doesn't matter that much if you're going first or second, because Trifarian War Camp is always good for your game plan. And going wide with this battlefield is insane. And War Camp also makes all of your hook targets 1 might bigger. So for example, your Vanguard Captain would be a 4 might unit on the War Camp, and suddenly hooking a Vanguard Captain can now take a 5 might Darius Champion out of your hook. So it's very good with baited hook in general, and it's also the battlefield where you can win by holding, for example against Yi or Set that have fewer units and Yi wants to defend rather than attack. So you can just build an army there and get plus 10 to plus 15 might out of your war camp. And I have even made my war camp so big that an Annie player could never end the game because the Annie player's Vi would never get big enough to clean my war camp. Then zone warrants. Pick zone warrants when you can't choose if you're going first or second. And an important thing to note is that with zone warrants, you can play more spells in your deck. You can side in 1 or 2 spells without taking any out because the battlefield will easily unbrick an awkward hand by discarding and drawing new cards. And the big potential with zone warrants is that if you empty your hand, zone warrants is also a free draw engine. So you can draw cards with zone warrants even if you don't have any cards to discard in your hand. So maybe with zone warrants you could take a couple of those expensive cards out of your deck, like maybe one Darius out of your deck, make your deck a little bit cheaper with a couple more cheap spells, and try to vomit out your hand to draw free from zone warrants. Arena's Greatest. Everybody knows what Arena's Greatest does. It's an insane best of 3 format battlefield. So for example, if you win with War Camp game 1, you play zone game 2 but you lose. Now you can play Arena's Greatest and choose to go first. It's important to make sure to not have too many spells in your deck for Arena's Greatest, because spells may break your hand early on, which will slow down your game and potentially just lose your game on the spot. So I would swap out all grand stratagems except when you're going against Aurora or Yi. There are a couple of exceptions like Falling Star and Hidden Blade. These are very aggressive spells because they can get you a couple points by just getting rid of an enemy unit, and they're just very aggressive spells. A funny thing to note is that Arena's Greatest also technically makes your Dravens 1 might bigger, and you could play a big Draven very early on if you get an aggressive start. Now some of the game plan stuff, like a couple of very good starting hands. Let's start with the double 2-drop. When you're going second, you have 3 runes. You can play a 2-drop, then tap your Darius Legend, and then play another 2-drop, and then the famous Seal in the Vanguard Captain combo, which is possible even with only 2 runes. You can play Seal, it floats 1 rune because you didn't use the rune. You only paid a power cost, so you only recycled a rune, but you did not pay an energy cost. So you have 1 floating rune. Now you can tap Darius Legend because you played a Seal and you have activated Legion, and you can play Vanguard Captain turn 1. So 1 rune floating, 1 rune from Darius Legend, and 1 rune on board. 3 units turn 1, and this alone can just snowball the game out of control. Now if you have Hook, you can even look to slam it down on turn 2 if you have had a good turn 1 start, and Hook can just dish out countless units each turn to the point where it can become so oppressive that your enemy just simply cannot handle the sheer value you're getting from your Hook. But be careful with the early Hook. If you do not have a Seal on board, you have to be very careful about the resource management with Hook. But one of the game plans is just to go wide and just keep perma hooking, then maybe have a Hidden Blade or grand stratagem to end the game with. Just get a Draven, Darius or Vayne from your Hook and surprise the enemy with just a ton of might. But to actually succeed in winning with Hook, there are countless tricks which I will go over later on, so bear with me. Then you can just win by having a lot of cheap units, for example getting ton of 2-drops, a Seal, a Vanguard Captain, vomit out your hand, even get some free draw from zone warrants, kill one of your tokens with a Hidden Blade for more draw, or get draw from Kaisa to not run out of cards even if you keep vomiting out everything you have in your hand. And with cheap cards, you can always accelerate your Darius easily, and you can just become the basic aggro deck with ton of cheap units, but it does have the risk that if you don't end fast enough, you eventually lose the game because you start running out of steam. Then you can have the Falling Star Darius champion kind of control hand. You just have to take good value trades, almost become that control deck and just outvalue your opponent. But you have to remember with Falling Star that the 2 power cost is very dangerous, so you really have to be careful of when you play that Falling Star. And then is the other side of the Darius champion hand. You get early cheap units which get you a couple of points by conquering, and finally when your opponent starts to conquer those battlefields back, you play Darius from your champion zone, get a point or 2, your opponent conquers again, and you play Darius from your hand, and it becomes this back and forth. You play Darius, your opponent has to kill that Darius and conquer the battlefield back. You play another Darius and your opponent has to conquer the battlefield back again, etc, etc. And after 2 Dariuses Darius, you should be at least at 6 points. So then you can try to end the game with a surprise vein or a big Draven, hidden blade. And sometimes in these games, I choose to not play hook because these games can be so aggressive that I just don't find a good spot for the hook because I find more value in my other cards and more aggression in those Dariuses, etc, etc. But when you're going very aggressive, you have to have a game ending plan in mind with a hidden blade or Draven, etc. These are some of the ways you can play your hands and games in a nutshell, but the best way to know what, how and when you need to play these hands is just to play the deck over and over again. This deck does require a lot of that game sense to know when to go aggressive or when to slow down and back off for a little bit. What is a good value trade and what might the enemy's hand and game plan be also. So you have to read the enemy's hand while you also have to plan ahead in your own game. But I will go over the matchup specific game plans and stuff in the separate video. Now comes the part where I feel like the actual emoji. So all the tricks of the Darius deck in general and the baited hook card. And I guess I'm gonna go through baited hook first. So what units to look for, what units to kill with baited hook, and how to actually predict what you're gonna get from your hooks. Because baited hook isn't only RNG. So important early game hook targets are Spectral Matron, Vanguard Captain, and sometimes even an early Vayne can be pretty huge. Well, Spectral Matron is always good. It's not only good in the early game, but just make sure that your trash has good units for Spectral Maiden to actually summon. Then later on in the game, you want to find a Darius or a big Draven, or like I said, Spectral Maiden is always a good value unit. Now, you can predict what you're going to find in your future hooks. For example, let's say you mulligan 2 cards at the start of your game, and that recycles 2 to the bottom of your deck. Then you play an aggressive hook turn 2, and now, if you keep track of when and what you recycled, after using hook for about 3 times, you can start to predict what you're gonna get from your future hooks. I play my turns, and at the start of every turn, I draw a card, maybe draw a couple cards from Hidden Blade or Kaisa or Zone Warrants, and my deck has 25 cards left. Let's say I have used hook 4 times and recycled 2 at the mulligan. This means you have recycled 18 cards because hook recycles 4 cards and plays 1 card. So remember, hook doesn't recycle 5 cards, it recycles 4 and you play 1. Now you know 18 cards out of your 25 card deck, and let's say you still haven't seen a single Darius. That means your 18 cards have 2 Dariuses in them. So knowing this, you could actually hook your Spectral Maiden, which is a 4 might unit, because mathematically you should start seeing at least 1 Darius from your hooks. And this works the other way around too. Let's say you're in the same situation, you know 18 cards out of your 25 cards, and you basically know over half of your deck. And let's say you have played 2 Spectral Maidens in this game already. That means you have only 1 Spectral Maiden left in the rest of your deck that you don't know. And let's say you haven't seen 2 Dravens or 2 Vaynes yet, and you have 1 Vanguard Captain still in your deck. Now in this situation, I would rather hook a 2 might unit now, because I have so many 3 might units that would be good hits from my hook. So hooking a 2 might unit would be enough in this case, because you could hit Draven, Vayne or Vanguard Captain from your hook. I hope this made sense to you, but you can still take this even further if the game goes long enough, or maybe you just have 2 hooks on board and you just recycle through your deck very fast. You can go through your whole deck in a game, and this has happened to me multiple times. I repeat, you can go through your whole deck with your hook recycles in a game, and if you have kept track of the order which you have recycled your cards in, you can literally predict every single card you are going to see from your hooks. It is very difficult to do, but in the bigger events you are allowed to write down everything, so learn to use that to your advantage. You can mark down the important things you have seen from your hooks, and suddenly you know everything you're gonna draw, everything you're gonna see from your hooks, etc, etc. So every time you kill a unit with your hook, think why you chose to kill that 3 might unit, for example. Don't kill your units just because. Everything you do and play should have a reason or a game plan in mind. So if you know you're going to most likely find a 3-might unit that you need from your hook, then you can hook a 2-might unit. You don't need to hook a 3-might unit. Then some other niche tricks and tips for the Darius deck as a whole. Sometimes you may have to play Cleave in base to play around damage spells. Cleave is an action, so you can't react to, for example, a Void Seeker or Hextech Ray if you don't play Cleave beforehand. If the enemy plays a Hextech Ray on your unit, it's too late to play Cleave anymore because it's not a reaction and your unit dies before you even get to play the Cleave. Then Darius will accelerate itself even if it is played as the second card. So if you want to accelerate Darius with a spell, you might want to play the spell first to see if the enemy, for example, uses a defy on your spell, because if a spell is defied, it won't count for Legion or for Darius champion's ability. So knowing that that spell goes through without getting defied and then playing your Darius accelerated is better than playing your Darius first and then trying to play a spell to accelerate your Darius, but the spell gets defied. If you want to accelerate Darius with a Legion card, play Darius first, then, for example, play your Vanguard Captain. And this way, Darius gets accelerated and your Vanguard Captain gets its Legion effect. If you have a baited hook on board, try to conquer with the unit that you are planning to kill with your hook. For example, if I am looking to hook my Vanguard Captain, I conquer with the Vanguard Captain, I get the free point, and the Captain would most likely die on my enemy's turn anyways. So now I kill my Vanguard Captain with my hook. I got a very free non-committal point out of the Vanguard Captain, and then I get units from my hook with killing the Vanguard Captain. So try to get your points with the least amount of commitment, and the best way to do this is scoring points with the units you are looking to kill with your hooks. Then plan out your future turns a little bit. So if you have 6 runes, and you know you need to accelerate Darius on your next turn, but you only have 3 cost units in your hand. Make sure not to recycle any runes this turn, and maybe play that Manufacturer rather than playing that Vanguard Captain, because then next turn you can play Darius into Vanguard Captain, which accelerates Darius, gives your Vanguard Captain Legion, and this wouldn't have been possible if you had recycled any runes last turn. Then lastly, try to keep track of the order in which you recycled your runes. For example, let's say I have 2 yellow runes, but I want to use Grand Stratagem next turn. But I also want to use a Vanguard Captain this turn to make my Grand Stratagem next turn have more units to buff. Rather than betting on getting 2 yellow runes next turn, it's better if you know you're getting 2 yellow runes next turn. So if I know I recycled multiple yellow runes at the start of the game, and then I had to recycle some red runes, I know I am going to draw those yellow runes first, because I recycled them first, and then I can trust that I will be getting 2 yellow runes next turn, and I can play a Vanguard Captain now, and it actually makes sense. It's not just a bet. Then let's quickly move to the last couple of tips and tricks and how to actually end games. First of all, to dominate and become more confident with the deck, you need to start to plan for your future turns. The more you plan ahead, the better you stay in control and the easier you end your games. So like I mentioned the couple tips before, you want to get your points as free and non-committal as possible, and if you have to commit a bigger unit, depending on the game state, you can play more units straight to the battlefield to kind of protect your other units. And remember, you can also play units from hook straight to a battlefield. So if you know there's probably a Draven coming out of your hook, move a unit to a battlefield first, then use your hook. You have to play and predict many things, so always think about everything you want to do on your whole turn at the start of your turn. I have certain cards I'm looking to play this turn. I just plan ahead. If I want to use Darius, what card do I accelerate Darius with? And then you have to have a plan B. So now if I accelerate Darius and the enemy responds to my attack with Darius, I have to have a plan B so I don't just get cooked. So for example, if the enemy plays a debuff on my Darius, I now have a hidden blade I can use on the enemy unit, so the enemy wasted his debuff and his unit ended up dying and my Darius ended up living anyways. Then you have to predict what the enemy will most likely do on their turn. For example, are they at 8 runes? If they're at 8 runes, you have to play around Watcher and Deadbloom. So maybe you shouldn't commit all of your units to that one battlefield and they all die to a Watcher next turn. Or maybe they're sitting on Icathian Rain, so now you want to play your units to the Trifarian War Camp to make them just a little bit bigger. And once you start to plan your turns ahead and have a plan B for when things go wrong, and also predict what the enemy is gonna do on their next turn, that's gonna increase your win percentage by a ton. And it's also gonna make ending games easier because you actually have a clear game plan in mind. And we're finally getting to the end of the video, so it's a perfect time to also talk about how to end games. Either you get to 6 points early on, just pull all of your units back, and then look to conquer both battlefields next turn. It's very simple. And then you have, for example, Hidden Blade. They're amazing for ending games with conquers and with holding, because Hidden Blade can also just be hidden with 0 energy. So if you have even 2 Hidden Blades in hand, you can also look to stack everything to a battlefield, hide a Hidden Blade there for 1 power, and leave 2 runes up to then play another Hidden Blade when you force your enemy to attack into you, because you're threatening to end the game anyways. So Hidden Blade is a very powerful game ending card, while it's also good in the early game. Or then maybe you have a Darius in hand and 2 Vaynes and a Kaisa still left in your deck. You can play Darius first, then hook an ally to most likely get an accelerated Vayne, Kaisa, or even better, another Darius from your hook. And this way you just become super explosive with multiple big accelerated units. But to actually rely on getting the accelerated units from your hooks, you have to remember to keep track of your recycled cards. Then you can also just get even 2 Dravens holding a battlefield, which is insane even against a Watcher, because even with the Watcher's -3 debuff, 1 Draven will still be a 7 might unit and it can still solo a Watcher. So Dravens are very good into Watchers and Deadblooms. Then you have the good old Grand Stratagem or Imperial Decree attack or even defense. Imperial Decree is a little bit useless on defense, but it's very good in attack. Stratagem can even hold against Watchers, for example. So there are countless lines to end games, and these are definitely not all of them. You know, there's different lines with acceleration, Hidden Blades, Facebreaker, just holding, or etc, etc. But you will learn how to end games the more you play. And when you know how to end your games, you will learn how to plan multiple turns ahead. And what you need to do and when and how will all just start to become more clear when you just keep playing the deck more. And at some points, I have already had a good game plan in mind at turn 2. For example, if the game state allows for it, I just instantly know that I'm gonna win against, for example, a Master Yi just by holding the Trifarian War Camp for the rest of the game. I'm gonna make a specific video for every single matchup for the Darius deck and how to side deck for all of those matchups, just because the matchup and side decking video is gonna be somewhat long in itself. So that's why I decided to release these videos separately. And if you got this far, you at least have to like the video, and see you next time. I've got some banger tournament videos coming up also.